Well, hi, everyone. This is an incredibly special episode. We are celebrating our 1-year anniversary of the Good News podcast. Like, honestly, I can't believe it. I was just saying to Matt, like, I can't believe it. It blows my mind that we've been doing this for a year. And man, we've been so blessed to have some absolutely unbelievable guests. And we're going to tell you a bit more about that in just a moment. But this episode, it's very different from anything we've ever done before. This one's going to take clips of 5 different episodes just to show some of the places we've been, the people we've been with over this year as we celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Good News podcast. I also thought it was a great opportunity to remind ourselves why we do the Good News podcast. We developed the Good News podcast because we believe the world needs more good news. Man, not just through this pandemic, but really it's kind of the way of the world. We often hear about the bad stuff. We hear about the heavy stuff. And absolutely, there's lots of pain in the world, and we believe God is with us in that pain. But we also believe there's lots of good news. And we want to be people who share the good news. In fact, the gospel literally means good news. And as followers of Jesus, we're invited, we're called to be bearers of good news. So our hope is that as a community, we can be doing that through the Good News podcast. I know I've experienced that over this year. I hope that you have too. I want to thank a couple people. I want to thank Matt Grosso. Matt has been the producer of the Good News podcast. And I'm going to get emotional just thanking Matt here because Matt has given his all over this year to helping promote and develop the Good News podcast. And he listens, he records, he puts it together. He makes it sound good when we go to launch it, and just so grateful for all that Matt has done. I know we're both really excited about the future, what still might be to come. I also want to thank our daughter, Leah. Leah has been very much involved in the planning and coordinating as well before she went back to school. So thanks to Leah, and I hope to have you back again one day involved with this as well. But it's a great team. And for everyone else, our production team that also certainly have been very supportive and helped make this happen. It's a blessing to be a part of it. And we hope that the Good News podcast blesses you every time you get to listen to it or watch it. We also want to encourage everyone to be a part of the Good News podcast family, if you will. And there's a number of ways that you can do that. You can try to listen or watch the podcast weekly. I know I'm making an effort to do that as well, even though I've recorded them. And every time it's like, oh, wow, this is such great stuff. So hopefully you can experience that too by just making it a practice, a discipline to watch or listen every week to the Good News podcast. You can subscribe, you can share, you can follow us on Instagram, Good News with Jamie Holtman, and check us out there. You can also, I would encourage you to go to the Good News podcast and just scroll through the different episodes that we've done over the course of this year. I just did that recently in preparing for today. And I was amazed at the guests. I was reminded of conversations. I'm going to go back and listen to some myself because I want to hear them again. And you might want to do that as well. So all ways to be a part of this. But for now, I want to turn it over to Matt, who's going to take a few clips from several of the podcasts that we've done over the course of this year. And also want to say thanks to every guest that we've had. You've done a great job. We've been blessed to share some time with you and to share some good news with others. But the ones we've chosen for today, and we may do it again. If you've got ones you want to hear, just let us know, and maybe we'll do this again. But the ones we're going to put into this episode as we celebrate the 1-year anniversary, we had to get something from Theo Fleury. As you know, that was just incredible to have Theo Fleury on the Good News podcast. We'll take a clip from Theo. Lisa Tomaitis, the coach of the national women's basketball team. That was definitely one of my favorite episodes, and the conversation with her is just off the charts. So we'll take a piece from that. We're going to take a piece from the interview with the Peel Police, with our chief and our deputy chief, that really give us good news in what our Peel Regional Police are doing to try to really work around anti-Black racism and create racial justice and just a better world, a better community for all. Of course, Colleen Taff, if you look at Colleen's got so much energy, and it comes out in this episode we did with her. So hopefully you'll enjoy a piece from that. And we're going to conclude this episode today with a little piece from one that was very special, certainly to me and to our family. We had our kids, my wife Katrina had our kids on for a special episode to reflect on the carnival, the Lucas Holtom Carnival, and the way that God has brought hope through that over the 20 years that we've been doing it. So hopefully you can enjoy the little clips from these episodes. It might take you back to watch the whole thing or listen to the whole thing. Feel free to do that as well. But thanks to you as well for being a part of the Good News podcast family. And we look forward to another year of serving you, of sharing good news, and just appreciating and being blessed together. So thanks again for being a part of it. And thanks for joining us for this episode too. Oh, hey, Theo, just a couple quick questions to close, if we could. We haven't talked hockey at all, and I'm totally cool with that, but maybe just your favorite hockey memory, just quick, if we could. And then what would be your word of encouragement, of good news for people who might be listening to this? Both people might be struggling with some of the things we've talked about, or people who are trying to support others who are struggling. Yeah.
Well, geez. So, my whole entire life, I was told, you're too small and you're never going to make it. Okay. And, when I look in the mirror, I don't see somebody who's small. I see somebody who is incredibly determined, somebody who's going to outwork every single person. Somebody's going to compete. And so, my fondest memory is, when I was 6 years old, that's when I talked about playing in the NHL. And how many 6-year-olds do you know that are that focused and, are that goal orientated at that age? Well, I was. And so I never listened to the noise, okay, because it was other people's perception of me, and they didn't have a clue who I was. They only looked at my outward appearance, and they didn't look at my DNA, and they didn't look at my, all of the adversity, that I had faced to get to the ultimate goal. And so, for a guy who wasn't supposed to play one game in the National Hockey League, I played, including playoffs, like over 1,150 games. And so basically for 15 years, I got to do something that I absolutely loved to do. And they actually paid me to do that, and because of that, I was involved in some of the greatest hockey moments in Canadian history. I played for Canada 10 times in my career. Won a Stanley Cup, won a World Junior, won a Turner Cup in the minors, and then ultimately finished it off with the 2002 Olympic gold medal in Salt Lake. And so to pinpoint one particular, moment would be very difficult. But the fact that, that I wasn't supposed to, and that I did, and not only did I do that, but I, was a part of all these incredible experiences, and I got to hang around with the greatest leaders, in my sport. And, what was interesting was, the Gretzky's, Lemieux, Sakic's, Yzermans, all these guys, their greatest leadership quality was what? Humility. Mm-hmm. Humility, right? And I played for a lot of guys, a lot of leaders who led with ego. Mm-hmm. And you know what happened around February? Everybody could not stand that person, would not follow them, would not do anything, And what we're seeing in the world right now is ego leadership. Right? And when you lead with ego, nobody's going to follow you anywhere. But if you lead with humility and compassion and empathy and all those things, people will follow you to the ends of the earth if you lead like that, right? And like I said, we don't have a whole lot of leadership in that space, right? And so I pray for one thing, and that's willingness, willing to do whatever needs to be done, right? Without questioning, without, just letting it happen. And, words of advice is, if you're struggling, you're in the majority, not the minority, that's what, the last 15 years has taught me in my research, is that it's all of us, right? And, in order for us to get out of this, it's going to take all of us, right? It's going to take all of us to listen. Listen with a compassionate heart, empathetic heart, understanding heart, faith-based heart, because when you live in your heart chakra space, the world's an unbelievable place to be. But if you live in your brain, nothing good happens, because your brain is designed for negativity, right? It's our survival mechanism, right? And they say it takes 500 positive thoughts to undo one negative thought. Yeah. So the less time I spend in my head is good for everybody.
Elisa, I would love to hear a bit about, like, you're right in the thick of things. Like, you're preparing for the Olympics, like preparing for the Olympics. Most of us watch the Olympics on TV. We don't prepare for the Olympics. So tell us a bit about, like, where are you right now? Where have you been? What is this? What is this road like as you lead your team up to the Olympics coming up this summer?
Yeah, let me tell you, it's been a winding road. I mean, in February 2020, we actually qualified for the Tokyo Olympics. We were in Belgium, and so we clinched our berth, and that was an amazing experience. And team was playing really well. And then it was literally 1 month later that we got the news that the Olympics were going to be postponed. So we went from, like, kind of the highest of highs and looking forward to what was going to be on the horizon to, like, whoa, now what's happening here? And I think for the first few months, we thought, well, perhaps they're going to be canceled. Maybe we're not going to have this opportunity to compete and show what we've been working so hard towards. But as time went on, we had to, use the buzzword pivot and get really creative around how we were going to continue to prepare for these, hopefully the Olympics that were going to take place in a year later. So a lot of our athletes were able to return to their professional teams in Europe and still play. But for us as a team, we weren't able to come together and train at all for 15 months. So we just got back together again end of May. We're actually here in Tampa training at the Raptors facility, which is super cool. Our first place that we're supposed to be training in, or that our home has been in Edmonton, but because of the travel restrictions and international and people coming home from other countries, we couldn't gain access there, so we had to come to Tampa. But it's been fantastic. And then we just returned from our AmeriCup competition in Puerto Rico, and now we're back in Tampa. We're in 3 days of isolation. Then we'll train for another 10 days and then head to Japan, and we have some training time there north of Tokyo. And then we'll enter into the village. So it's been a wild year of trying to figure out how do we continue to grow as a team and stay connected while being in all corners of the world. I remember we had some virtual meetings and a virtual training camp in February when other national teams were training in person. We had to do it via Zoom like this. And we're trying to schedule meetings for people in 6 different time zones.
Wow.
So I mean, even just scheduling the meeting was a task, but so it's great to finally be back together with them and be face to face and be working towards this goal. And now I can't believe we're just over a month away from the opening ceremony.
Wow, amazing. And so how did things go in Puerto Rico? Because that was a big part of the preparations. And we were just chatting a bit before we started. It sounded like it was lots of elements happening, down in Puerto Rico as you bring the team together, as you play some competitive basketball, trying to get ready. So how did things go there? And then, like, who's traveling with you? Like, how many are there? And just some of the, most of us don't get a chance to, like, I hope, man, I think I don't have to say this. Watch our Canadian women's team and cheer them on this summer, please. I think, but most of us will do that, but we don't get a chance to hear what are the underpinnings of how you got here and the dynamics with the team. And I know we were talking earlier, just even with, like, people have families, they have life outside of the Olympics, as important as it is, and just trying to bring all of that together as the leader of this team.
Yeah. We'll start with the tournament. So we again, a lot of moving parts. We do have 3 of our athletes that are playing in the WNBA right now, so are unable to be with us up until about 10 days before our first game at the Olympic Games. So we're trying to figure out, how are we going to integrate them? They're players that have been with us for a number of years, but we don't have the luxury of time together with, given the fact we've had so much time apart. So we came in with a group of 20 and then cut down to 16 and went to Puerto Rico with the 12. That also included 4 others, the 3 WNBA athletes, and then our captain, Kim Gaucher, who just had a baby 3 months ago. So she was here at training camp, but then returned to Canada to be with her daughter. She hadn't been home in well over a year. So her parents hadn't met her baby yet. And so anyway, her husband and her baby are there right now. So she didn't come with us. So we didn't know what to expect, really, like having not played in a different group together. So we started out really well. We went 4-0 in our pool play.
Nice.
So went undefeated, finished first, and then crossed over and played a semifinal with Puerto Rico, the home team. And that was a team we had some difficulty with a year ago. They're also an Olympic-bound team from our zone. So great competition. We ended up losing by 4. And then played Brazil, who's typically, a powerhouse in women's basketball. They've dropped off a little bit as of late, but played them for the bronze and ended up losing in double overtime.
Oh, wow.
So the downside being disappointing finish, but the bigger picture is, we learned some valuable lessons. We were very fortunate to be in some close games. That's really what we want at this stage of the game. We have some young players who haven't been with us before. So I think just having that, going through some of those moments and seeing where we need to shore up some gaps and where we need to improve before we get to the Olympics is a really valuable lesson. When I think back to 2016 when we were in Rio, the lead up to that, 2015 we played in the Pan Am Games in Toronto, and then we had our Olympic qualifier in Edmonton, and we didn't lose a game all summer. And so heading into the Olympics in 2016, we were kind of in the reverse situation. We had won a ton of games. We hadn't been, we'd been tested, but we hadn't lost. And we ended up losing a quarterfinal game once we got to Rio. That was absolutely devastating for us. So when I think back to that, I'd much rather have the loss now and identify some of these things than in Tokyo. Having said that, it's going to be an extremely difficult tournament. We're one of many teams who are in medal contention. I think I read something a little while back saying of the 12 teams there are 10 that are medal contenders.
Wow.
So there's just a ton of parity. So so as far as how many people are traveling with us, we have as many or more staff as we do players. So we are very, very fortunate. We have an amazing support network. So we have there are 3 coaches. We have a manager. They all sit on the bench. We have a physiotherapist, an athletic therapist, a mental performance coach, our executive director. So there's probably 12 staff that are with us. We travel with a doctor. We start every morning with our COVID tests. So around 7 every morning, the doctor's coming around and doing our nose swabs. And so we have that every day for 3 months. That's part of our protocol. We're in masks if we're outside of our room, and we can really only be in our room or at the training facility. We can't go into any stores, encounter any other people. So being in Tampa, it's interesting because it's like life is carrying on as normal down here. No one's in masks anymore. There were parties. At our hotel and things like that. So we're kind of the weird Canadians that are walking around in masks while everyone else is like, hey, pandemic, what pandemic?
Oh, wow. Yeah. And that's right. In the midst of all of this, which would be stressful enough and complex enough, you got COVID happening too, to keep that before everybody and before the team and keep people disciplined.
And my experience is, not unlike many other newcomers, came from a country where, policing was not seen as an honorable profession. It was seen as an arm of the state, and so my parents came at a time before some civil unrest in Sri Lanka, and they literally came with the assets they could physically carry in their luggage. And, in their minds, I think they thought the sacrifice to come to a new country, whatever opportunities that I could, experience here had to be greater than the sacrifice of leaving a country, right? So they never thought about policing, that's for sure. And it was doctor, engineering, accountant, something like that. So, but what happened was when I was in high school, one of my teachers introduced me to an engagement program for ethnic children, cultural ethnic program with the local police uh, service. And as a result, I was able to, not only see a little bit of policing in the summer where my friends were flipping burgers and doing telemarketing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but as a young person, it actually exposed me not just to the job, but the relationships that I developed with the officers that really went out of their way to show me who they were. And back to the earlier point, their coaches, their uncles, their parents, their brothers, siblings, their community members too. Um, and it really shifted the this concept of relationships are everything. And going back to your initial thoughts are policing has been pretty proprietary, right? The traditional model where the chief says this is how we do it, we know what's best. And really in crisis, in emergencies, that's where we do our best. But the reality is we have to be informed by the public and community we serve in order to properly serve them. And that's a shift in mentality, which is not easy for police leaders to see how we interact with the community we serve. And so the reason I say that is because it's based on relationships. And all day long, Jamie, if you asked us to speak to your congregation, we do that because the listening part that Mark mentioned is how we tailor our service delivery and develop understanding of the lived experiences of those in our community. And both Mark and I have our own as immigrants too, and we've all experienced. I've experienced systemic and real racism in my life as a young person, and I've seen how it can manifest itself in a variety of systems. So, at any rate, relationships would turn me on to policing, Gwen.
That's awesome.
Mark?
So my journey to policing is a little convoluted, but as I told you earlier, I was born in Jamaica, and my mom was 16 when she had me, and based on stereotypical thinking, being born to a single teenage mother in rural Jamaica in relative poverty, there would be a particular outcome. Fortunately, that didn't occur, and I understood how fortunate I was when my mother came to Canada and I came several years later. And as an outfall of that, I've always been very grateful and for the way that my life has unfolded, and I felt some a real responsibility to give back, and my opportunity to combine that desire to give back and to better my adopted country. I joined the military. I became a combat arms infantry officer, and I loved what I was doing. And I was actually in Cyprus on a UN peacekeeping tour when there was a shooting involving a young black man by the name of Wade Lawson in 1988. I was in Cyprus and I was on a peacekeeping mission in Cyprus and Lebanon at the time. And I realized that, that while I was trying to keep the peace between warring factions in another country, there was conflict in my hometown. And at that point, I made the decision that, here was an opportunity to not only give back, but to contribute in a really positive way as a police officer. And that precipitated my decision to leave the military, which I loved and I still love. but as an opportunity to really, really commit to helping build the community that adopted me and has given me so much.
Wow. Thank you both.
Yeah.
I just feel blessed to hear your how God has worked in your life to bring you to where you are today. Everyone's got a story, and it's so powerful to hear. And I mean, I think often when we think about police officers, when people don't know a police officer, they just see the uniform and the badge, and there's human beings, like behind it, and it just is so helpful to hear this. And I just want to echo what Nish and Mark are saying, friends, as you're watching this, as you're listening to this. If you got questions or want to talk to the police officers or force or Peel Region Police, reach out, ask the questions. We want to open up the dialogue. I think it takes that's one of the things we're learning in this series of Table of Reconciliation. Let's come to the table together. Let's be human together. Let's talk together. And it's amazing what happens when we do that. And so really appreciate this open, honest opportunity to have conversation. And the listening piece that, of course, is so important to every leadership role. And just recognize that that's a huge part of what you guys are doing in your leadership roles. This next question, it kind of gets us to that open, honest piece. And I think certainly also recognizes the difference between the systemic reality sometimes and the individual police officers and the great work that they're doing. But in reality, as you've also named yourself, racism is real. And we're trying, that's why we're talking about this. We want to try to bring a new world, a different world, and that is no longer a reality. But some people have had, who we've been listening to, have had negative experiences with police officers in the past because of the color of their skin. And just an opportunity to say, what would you want to say to those people? But then I guess also the other part of that is what kind of accountability is in place when those sort of things happen. If I could ask, and Mark and Nish, we'll just leave it up to you, how or who wants to respond.
Sure, thank you, Jimmy. And Mark and I can, both fill in the spaces for sure. So, the first thing we want to do is acknowledge that, racism exists, systemic racism exists. It exists anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, anti-immigrant, manifests itself in all systems, inclusive at a systemic level in policing. At an individual level, let me tell you, we know people have had experiences that they know in their hearts were rooted in differential treatment that affects them in a personal way, and the intersection point might have been with somebody in uniform. And one of the things that Mark and I say is that we need to acknowledge people's reality and experience, right? By just performatively saying, okay, we heard you, and then trying to move on and fix it is not the right approach. Developing a mutual understanding and respecting people's experiences allow for a shared sense of value from which we can then try to move on. So, I think we want to say, to people who've had that experience, sorry, we're sorry. And we know that we, as the leaders of our system, it's on Mark and my shoulders, my team, the entire organization, to fix the gaps and change it, to create a narrative in a space that builds confidence in our community. I think Ben mentioned it before. Change takes time.
Yeah.
But I think hearing from Mark and I at the highest level to say, we acknowledge that systemic racism, anti-Black racism exists, and we're going to make every effort to squeeze it out of the system. And we are making some real, thoughtful and meaningful changes here in Peel that, frankly, aren't happening everywhere. There's a desire across police leaders to see change, but frankly, we're not going to wait. We're going to do it. I also want to acknowledge that we have 3,200 amazing people here. We had hired 167 officers last year, and 56% of them were racialized, 51% female. The reflection of who and what things look like is changing, and it does take time because we're unraveling decades. Mark talked about an incident from 1988, which still hurts our community, right? We frankly have decades of things to unravel, right? And we're not going to always get it right. But I think for those that have had an experience with an officer, they need to hear right from myself and Mark is that we I hope they really see the heart and confidence that we intend on making a change in our system. Health needs to do their part, education system, all the other systems need to do their part. We're gonna do ours here in Pittsburgh.
And so I always think about race and race. It's to me, it's more than black and white. See, Jamie, if we were to think about it only being a black and white issue, or only being based on color, or only being based on culture, we're going to exhaust ourselves. Then we're going to have a national African day, a national Nigerian day, a national Ghanaian, Italian, Germany, Japan. We couldn't very well have a national day. We'd run out of days in the year. This is why I love the Lord, because he's the great unifier. He's the great reconciliator. He says, you know what? You don't have to, there is no more of that. There's just children of the Most High God. When George Floyd happened, I remember being at the hospital, because I work at the hospital, and I want to tell you that I was devastated, but I wanted to be in denial. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to have the conversation. I didn't want to answer one more question. I didn't want anyone else to ask me how I was feeling. I didn't want to revisit, because I had spent my whole adult life trying to make myself invisible in Brampton. Does that I just wanted to fit in. I didn't want to be known as the Black girl. I don't want to be known, oh, she's smart for a Black girl, or she's talented for a Black girl, or she's educated for. I just wanted to be, full stop, a child of God, and everything else, who cares about? But I found myself in the midst of George Floyd having to pick up another coat and say, okay, now I'm going to play the advocate. It was exhausting. It was exhausting to have to be forced into the dialogue. It was exhausting to have to be teaching people about something that I was shocked that a lot of people didn't know. I remember talking to psychiatrists going, seriously? How are you dealing with your clients? Are you not bringing this up? How do you not talk about racism when it comes to mental health? This is and then I realized this is just who we are as a people. We live in a hyper-vigilant state all the time, and it's exhausting. Yeah. So when this George Floyd happened, I was confronted with my own, what's the word I want to say? With my own dismissal of my own race. I found myself really angry at the rioters, really angry at what had happened. And I kept saying, stop it. This could have been anyone. And I find that I was so confused at that time, because I didn't want to look at this topic yet again. Yet again and again and again. And I couldn't get away from it, because one of the things, being at work, being one of the only the few Black people that are there, I thought, wow. So some of my friends, my colleagues on their journey, they were too angry to have a conversation, but I have the Holy Spirit. And so I realized that the Lord was really challenging me. One of my favorite scriptures is Paul, when he says, I'm neither Jew or Gentile. I want to be all things to all people. Well, who told me to say that? That's my scripture, Lord. And I would just hear the Holy Spirit going, you're going to be all things to all people, all things to all people. So I was chosen to have these conversations, but not out of anger, out of a place of love, because I had this love of God and love of people that sat inside me. And I remember the Lord saying, if not you, who, Colleen? Who am I going to send that can wear, who can be an ambassador in chains, who could be telling of the good news and say, you know what, though, this may have happened. Yes, I'm an overcomer. However, I have the love of Christ. I have the love of Christ. I studied history and African studies in university. I spent 1 year in West Africa, in Ghana. Wow. I have seen the impact of slavery more than I can exhale. Coming from Jamaica, I thought we were a poor nation, but there's places in West Africa that I've seen where it's absolute poverty. Absolute poverty. It's not a welfare system. It's not a knocking on my neighbor's door. It's absolute poverty where you see hungry people. But as well in that nation, I've also seen the richest of the richest. The most richest person that I personally shook hands with lived in Ghana, right? So it just blows my mind. So I had been on this journey of Blackness, and I found last year I didn't want to talk about it. And so I went silent, as you said,
wow.
Violent. I went silent, and I knew everybody was waiting for me to say something. And I was like, I'm going silent. And what the Lord did say, and then I'll stop talking.
Yeah, no, please go, man, go.
What the Lord did say to me is, Colleen, I went silent on social media. He said, what you're going to do, you're going to respond the way I the gift I've given you. And I'm a playwright. And so he says, you're going to write. That's how you're going to respond to what's going on. So I stayed away from putting my comments out on social media, because one day I thought one thing, the next day I thought the next. And you know how social media is so permanent. I thought, instead of saying anything, I'm just going to be silent. So long-winded.
Wow. Oh my goodness. But I think is it safe to say, Colleen, that being silent wouldn't be your general DNA, your general makeup? You're right. Yeah. So how can I drill down on that a little bit? Like how long were you silent for when it all happened last year? And you've said a little bit, I think, about the why you were silent, but yeah, if we can talk a bit about the why behind that, wherever that was coming from. And even those emotions, like where was where was the anger coming from? Where was the, oh my goodness, like again and again. Yeah, just love to hear a bit more about that if we could today. Yeah.
Silent because I didn't know what to do. And so, the Bible that says, after you've done all, just stand. And I felt like I needed to hear from God. But I was silent for so many reasons, because I felt like there was an expectation that I say something, and I didn't want to buckle under the pressure. I didn't want to say something. I was nervous, because at that time we couldn't win. If we said this, we were bad. If we said this, it wasn't good enough. If we were we couldn't get.
Which group of people am I going to offend? I'm going to offend somebody no matter what I say, right?
So I don't want to say anything, right? It was hard, but mainly because I wanted to search where God was in this story. I was questioning, the God that I serve, to be honest, not because I didn't know he was Jehovah, but I knew from my history and African studies days that I knew that Christianity, the way that man used Christianity, they used it to enslave a whole nation of people. I knew that was the background. I knew that many of the people, my colleagues or people that I adore, would say, where's your God? This is the God that they used the Bible and they twisted it and then they put us in chains. And so I was really struggling with all of that stuff that once I got saved, I thought just went away. I thought just went away, but God was calling it out of me so that I can reconcile it with myself. And so I didn't want to speak until I had an opportunity to speak here. I wasn't going to speak this way, right? I just needed to understand. So I went through the emotions of anger and disappointment and frustration. It wasn't until the verdict came in, the verdict of him being guilty, that I expressed a ball of emotion. And I just cried. I cried. Here's what I was crying about. And I had a conversation with a very good friend of mine. I cried because I saw the loss on both sides. Number one, this family, this Floyd family that would never be the same again, children, grandchildren. And then I saw the police officer's family who will never be the same again. And that's what breaks my heart in the kingdom, is that such devastation can happen because we have an enemy that's out to steal the identity of all God's children. And I know it's hard to swallow, but his family is, suffering too. Did he wake up that morning and decide I'm going to murder a Black man? I don't know. But I know that in working with the police, they're not all bad. They're not all out to get us. And so I was trying to reconcile that all together so that I can speak from a place of love. Because if I'm not speaking from a place of love, I don't want to speak at all. So I waited until I got to that place. And it wasn't until I heard the verdict, I was on a Zoom call, and all of a sudden I'm like crying, and I'm like, what is happening? There was just this sigh of relief that, wow, that feels good, but it also feels really wrong as well. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Totally no. Oh. So what about the carnival? Like, let's talk about that, because that's been a big part of your life, and certainly I think that's where you've heard a lot about Lucas and that kind of thing. So what's the carnival been like for you guys? And you know, I know, Katrina, when we first, I think God blessed us with the idea out of the carnival, out of this loss, and what to do with some resourcing as we've shared that story. But we had a piece for the kids that was very important around the carnival too. We wanted this to be a good time for you guys. That was a byproduct of it, if you will. This could work really well, because instead of just being sad, like at a time where we're remembering, you know, his loss and what happened in Alberta, this would be a time where we could have fun as a family and remember him at the same time.
Yeah, and I wonder what it's been like for you over the years, because obviously, you know, when you're younger versus, you know, as you were older, like what that experience was like. I know the day was always so busy for us. Like, we always wanted to be able to enjoy it with you, and you did better.
I did enjoy it with
you. Did better. You did better than I did. I don't know why, but you were always able to. You know, I think there was a couple of years where I was able to get in there and do something with you.
One of the things I loved about the carnival was it's actually not hard to hide when there's like 3,000 to 5,000 people around.
Yeah.
And so I could hide with you guys and go off to the sports arena and do the obstacle course, and no one could find me. I know, like, you know, people would become, oh, we were trying to find it. Like, oh, well, you know. I know our team would have walkie-talkies, right? Like, so we can just like, I do not want a walkie-talkie. People will find me. It's fine. I just want to have some fun with my kids.
Yeah. What's it been like for you?
I always looked forward to it. Like, always have. Even as I got older, it was always like like it's a highlight of the summer. Like, it's a huge day. Always looking forward to it. Like, I would never dread it. Like, it's always so fun. Like, and you know, that's where all of our friends would come, our cousins, like any family members. Like, I always even just loved, especially as I did get a little older, like, it was one of the few times of year we would see like some of our extended family members, like Rick and Maura, like Dad, your aunt and uncle, like would come down from Grand Bend. It was so great to see them, and we so rarely would see them. So I enjoyed it for so many reasons, but it's something I always looked forward to and had fun at.
I definitely loved the people that it like brought together and just getting to see everybody. But yeah, my experience definitely changed a lot, like from when I was young to when I was older. Like, what I remember when I was young, in the morning, we would always get there super early, and I would help Mike Rodway set up the sports area, taking like everything out to the like far side of the park. And then once we were done that, I would like kind of find like my friends like Daniel O'Connell and whoever was there, and we would like be running around like maniacs, like
just trying to get everything in.
Do every single activity that was there. Big bags of candy and stuff. And then once I got older, I'd always volunteer at the basketball shoot. That was like my big spot. I remember one year I won a duck at the basketball shoot.
Oh yes,
like this massive yellow duck.
There was big controversy around those stuffed animals.
Well, I really wanted to keep this big duck, and people kept on throwing it out.
No, Dad.
People. What do you mean by people?
Because I feel like it was multiple people that took it from my room.
Dad brought it back.
Tried to donate it back to the carnival.
Dad brought it.
How long did we have it?
And then he won it a second time.
I won it again. I won it back.
Yes.
So
that was funny.
That was funny.
But
for me, it's just like, I was thinking about this question when you kind of sent the talking points to us, and it's like, it was so funny. Like, it's all just one fantastic blur. Like, there are definitely like pinpointed memories that I can think of, but it's all like, 'cause I mean, it's similar every year, but just like when I think of it, I just think of hanging with the same friends, going around everywhere. The climbing, the rock climbing was a big thing for me.
Yes.
That was so
Every year.
Yeah. I've actually just loved like how official it felt. I mean, it was so official. Like it's a huge event. Like people all over the community know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, that was our brother. Like it's our event. Like my parents run it. It's like no big deal. I have a T-shirt with my name on it. Like, I just loved how official it was. Like being a part of like the whole process. Like I actually loved having to be there so early, and we stay so late, and it's just and then we'd have like a little party afterwards.
And
it
was cool getting to see all like the behind the scenes and stuff, and all like the effort that went into it, and like getting all the volunteers together and everything. Like I always like seeing that was always really cool.
Yeah. But the only thing for me on the volunteer part was, I think maybe only in the past 2 years I've actually volunteered, and I think last year I did a bit more. I got the yellow shirt.
Yeah.
And I feel like this year it would have really been like I really got into the hard work of the carnival. So I've
you were
kind
just
of
getting
missed
to
out
the
on
age
that
where
so
you
far.
could take on more responsibility
Mm-hmm.
and be doing right.
It's cool because you mentioned about the behind the scenes stuff. That's cool, Cam, because people don't see that necessarily. People come for the day, and that's great, and that's all they're supposed to see. Have a great time, and and be blessed and inspired, and remember the appreciation of life. A little boy, another child would always remember like all part of it, but the behind the scenes stuff. Like there was a ramp up to the carnival that within our house, was huge.
Yeah, like
so what are some of your memories around that? Because there's lots to learn and hold on to there too. I think.
Well, there's always the Friday, like the Friday before.
Big day.
So that was almost just as exciting as the actual day, at least for me. Like I
always loved it. We would have like a big lunch at the
the
church
big
and
potluck
stuff
lunch.
with everybody.
Nana would come and like cook a ton of food, and we'd have a big
well, that was because that was actually the day when a lot of people came. You like that? Like you were talking about.
It was all the
Maura,
planning, and that's
day.
Like our friends and family.
Yeah, that's when everybody actually came. That's when we got to kind of
so it's just the big setup prep day. Like so the whole carnival team is there, but then some of those extended family members or friends who were a little more involved but not quite carnival team, they would all come on that Friday, and we'd just be getting everything ready, just going around doing whatever we needed to do. And it was just sort of the start of it, the start of the carnival weekend. Because I mean, the O'Connells, like if I don't know how many people still remember the O'Connells, but they would always come for the carnival specifically, and they'd come on the Friday, and it was just the start of the party for us with like their kids, like just hanging out, and they'd stay over and then be there for the carnival the next day. So
it was like the kickoff to the weekend.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
like even like it was cool, like even like months before, it slowly kind of starts to we start getting ready. Like we have the planning team come over to our house, and we have the meeting there, and then we usually have like another meeting, and then even like the week leading up to the carnival, we're talking about it, starting to get things ready.
Picking
and there's
things
just
up.
like there's a mood, a vibe in our house
totally,
the week leading up to the carnival. It gets me excited for it, to be honest.
Cool. What about you, Katrina?
Well, I mean, because it's a quick turnaround from school, it was always, school is done, and it was kind of, okay, good. Now I can think about whatever I need to think about for carnival. And always that little heightened sense of not panic, but just you're on high energy mode, because this has to happen and this has to happen, and making sure have I remembered everything, and you're collecting. We would often get a lot of the donations would be coming here for stuffed animals and doing those things, getting the t-shirts if we needed the t-shirts, and doing the t-shirt run, and and the volunteers. And that was always the week of too would be a really big
like push for that.
And it never failed that by the time by the time Friday came, we had more people than we had spots for. You know, we were doubling up. And of course, there's, you know, a week earlier, it's like, oh my gosh, we don't have enough. We don't have enough volunteers. And then all of a sudden, whoo. Yeah. So that was, you know, you're always in that sense of that period of, you know, so for me, that was a focus, right, of the week before the carnival. And depending on, because it was the second Saturday in July, so sometimes it was July 8th, which is a really quick turnaround. And then the latest it was July 14th, I think. Yeah. So so different periods of different years, there was a little more calm, but some years when it was like that first week, it was pretty intense.
Panic mode.
Yeah. And I mean, just over the years too. I mean, I think over the years, just how things have changed. That was interesting. I mean, you guys wouldn't remember when you were small, but like how we used to do the volunteer thing. We'd mail out letters and right? Not emails. It was mail. I had to go get stamps and, you know, oh gosh, it was a big expense too.
Like, because it's been 20 years, right?
Yeah. So things have
wasn't
changed.
all online then.
No, not at all. And even when it was going online, still like sort of getting used to that and then getting everybody else used to that. And so it was just different years. And then even for you guys at the carnival too, I mean, my memories of you, especially when you were little, you know, and I may not see you, someone usually went around with you, you know, when you were smaller, and it wasn't necessarily me or dad. And you know, the end of the day, then you know, I think each of you probably, we have a picture of you like just passed out asleep on some room in the church while we cleaned up, and you guys are just like totally passed out because you know you had a great day.
Yeah. One of the things that comes back to me as we're talking now is just how it evolved over the years, how it grew over the years. And again, you guys wouldn't remember it when it first started. Like, we had no idea the first year we did it if it was going to work. Our fear was that no one would come. And you know, I think maybe 300, maybe up to 500, like that first year, which actually blew us away. Like we had, you know, and then what it became over the years, it just naturally continued to grow. And like I said earlier, up to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people if it was a nice day. And just the way it sort of naturally grew over the years and evolved. And I think, you know, something like a behind the scenes change too was when we first started it, like there was just a few of us that were a part of it. That's often the way things start. And I remember the first few years, like honestly, I didn't like the carnival because I was just so busy. I was doing everything, you know? And then after a while, like we just developed this team that was so good. And I just want to thank the team. They know who they are. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, for both the production and like the you know, just what this team was able to accomplish and get done. It just continues to amaze me. It's one of the best examples I'll ever have of a team operating really well. People knowing their roles, trusting each other, getting her done, and believing in the reason why we were doing it, to be a blessing to the community and honor the gift of life, including a little boy.
And I loved always bringing the ideas to the table. Like every year, it was never just you or me. Everybody was always thinking like, oh, we could do this to make it better, or we could do this. And I just loved that because it was just, you know, incredible, you know.
Yeah. And there's just the way it did become, I think as Leah said earlier, a community event where it was absolutely has been at the heart of our church. It's we'll talk about hope in a bit, but that's been at the heart of who we are as a church. And a signature event for us, but also for the whole of the city. And it was really cool over time. Like it's almost like that snowball just rolling down the hill and getting bigger every year. And the people that would get on board for it and be a part of it. And so, you know, it would be fun to talk a bit about what's a memory that you have of the car. I know there's so many of others that became a part of this over the years, and unique things that they did to be a part of it because they wanted to, you know.